And good morning to you, although it's hardly a good morning for a lot of folks in our area. And as I'm sure most of you know, there is a breaking news story and regarding the stabbings of some 20 students, and I know at least one adult, at Franklin Regional High School in Murraysville. And information still coming out. This happened around 7:30 this morning, right before classes started. The student, he is a male, has been taken into custody. Some students do have life-threatening injuries, although the media were originally saying that there were no life-threatening injuries. However, a doctor at Forbes Regional in Monroeville did say that indeed some of these injuries are life-threatening. A lot of the students that they have at Forbes, and I believe they have 7 students and an adult taken there, and they have wounds to their abdomen, to the trunk, and a knife there obviously is potentially a killer. Some students in surgery right now. The district has not only suspended school at the high school where this occurred, but also I believe the middle school and elementary schools are being also shut down for the day. I know there's a news conference going on right now at Forbes of what they can tell us. But students have been life-flighted to 4 hospitals. There were 20, 30 ambulances, it seemed, outside, so a lot of other students being transferred via ambulance. A definite scene of carnage, in fact, there. This was in the science wing, they're saying, of Franklin Regional. And I mean, I don't, you don't, I'm just blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what to say. There are little reports coming out now that the kids that were in the school have access to their cell phones. They are being interviewed by local media, but also by CNN and information is coming out, but those are not necessarily reports that you can take to the bank. One story already circulating, and this comes from a reliable source, I believe, because it comes from a doctor at Forbes Regional who says that one student was saved by another student, a girl who had the wherewithal, the cool, and the courage to apply pressure to her wound, and apparently kept her alive as a result. So most of you will be most of you listen not in real time, but in podcasts. So whatever I'm saying now is old news, and it might even be incorrect. So I feel I'm at a disadvantage now in terms of providing information in a professional manner. So I've asked Jess to stay on top of what's coming across from reliable sources. So if you stay with me, I will keep you up to date as much as is known. Your best bet for a full accounting will be, of course, on the noon news. The local television stations are simply on top of this story. This is the kind of story reasonably where we do rely on television news for not only a sense of immediacy, but just to feel connected to a story that's way too close. So they will be, I am assuming, on air all the way up until their noon newscast. So we will, as I said, try to keep you up to date. if any of you are still with me, I feel like I'm just losing my entire audience by telling you this. But if you are with me and are monitoring this breaking story and see something, feel free to email me and be a stringer reporter for me, since I'm sort of stuck here. I must say, I didn't see all the local stations. The one I happened to see, and I don't normally tune them in, is my former station, WTAE. And and I never saw who this woman was who I was hearing, but whoever was anchoring, because they had a live shot on the screen all the time, so I never saw her face, was extremely good. Very, very calm, very professional, not saying stupid things or speculating too much. And I tip my hat to whoever that was. I was hearing. It was an excellent, excellent job. The breaking news like this, that is fraught and terrifying and inexplicable, and then becomes the focus of the national media as well. I mean, I'm looking at my Twitter feed, and I have I follow newspapers in Europe, and they've already tweeted about this event here.
The FBI's there.
What?
FBI's there.
The FBI is on scene, Jess tells us. Yeah, the up until now, my understanding of the law enforcement that was on scene were the local police, Murraysville PD, and the county police, Murraysville in Westmoreland County, even though it feels like it's part of our county. It is right there on the edge of Westmoreland County. So, unfortunately, here we go again, and we will now see pictures in the paper of beautiful young children, victims, a perp. We'll find out what was wrong in his life, what happened. Astonishingly to me is that one person could injure, and some grievously, 20 people with a knife. That's the kind of carnage that one usually thinks would require a gun, because a knife. A knife, you have to literally be whoever he was. He was very thorough, given the equipment he had. So the doctor that I heard said that, these are penetrating knife wounds, which are serious. They are not, not superficial. At least I imagine that some of these 20 that we're being told are injured, some might have, in fact, what amount to superficial or slashing more than stabbing wounds. Who the hell knows? And I don't even... Wasn't it just yesterday we were talking about the Eagles? Or was that Monday? I just... All right. And now, of course, the gun nuts will be saying, you know that. The gun nuts are loving this one. They are loving this. What are you going to do? Take the knives away from everybody? Now, a knife is not allowed on school property, and I have no idea if Franklin Regional, for instance, has metal detectors. I think there's a sense that the only schools who need metal detectors are urban schools. And here is the epitome of a suburban district. And maybe they, in fact, don't have metal detectors, which might have prevented this. I have no idea. Okay. I'm I'm going to have to leave the subject since I have nothing left to say. If anybody does, feel free to contribute 412-316-3381 or email Lynn at pghcitypaper.com. Okay? I'm getting a lot of thanks, by the way, from people for the interview with Bob Mulvihill, the ornithologist at the aviary. So, I'm glad that you appreciate it. It even got mentioned on the social chatter that's on the Eagle Cam website. So that's good. That drives all these bird lovers to our show. Yeah. All right. Know what? Let's get into some things that I don't know. I have a feeling I'm going to be talking to myself today. That's okay. You do think, such a beautiful day. This is the way the sky looked on 9/11. Just a beautiful day. And, people's spirits are up, and imagine kids going off to school. They're in the hallway, and that's where this happened, in the hall. They're in the hallway, they're laughing, they're talking, they're whatever they're doing, and then this happens. I mean, it's just, again, the chaos that is our lives, even though we pretend, and I guess it's the only way most people can function, we pretend that there's, a measure of rationality and control and all those things that make us feel safer to, the way that we've set up our lives, and that we have great power in them. And then things like this happen, and you think, wow. So I'm going to head into a topic that I often enjoy, and it has to do with words and language. So that's where I'm heading. Someone is writing me about, hang on, let me get to your emails, and then we'll get into that. Henry writes, as soon as I heard about this, I turned on CNN to see if the story was being carried nationally. It may have been a coincidence, but I noticed that it wasn't until the number of victims went from 7 to 20. And then CNN started covering. Now, at this moment, CNN is covering it live with cut-ins from KA. Well, that's interesting, because when I looked at CNN, they were using TAE. I think the way it usually works is CNN has a working relationship with one station in a market. And I don't know who that is. If you're telling me it's KDKA, that's cool. But the fact is when I was looking at them, they were using video from TAE. So again, I don't know. Chuck writes, already the gun advocates are gloating, of course, and making snide remarks, suggesting sarcastically that there should be knife laws and knife control. I know. I would say to them that perhaps the current gun control laws prevented this kid from using a gun today, and had he used one, this could have even been worse. This is certainly no time for gloating. God knows. But, you do immediately know that this will be something the NRA is loving. I'm not saying, but loving for their purposes. Okay. Dorothea writes, CNN is saying 17 teens have life-threatening wounds to the torso, chest, and back. Thank you, Dorothea. Yes, that's from the same report from the, I don't know if it's from the trauma surgeon or from just at Forbes Regional, which the two hospitals closest to the event are Forbes, and of course that new competing hospital, totally unnecessary, that UPMC put up a few blocks away, which I guess is called UPMC East or something. I know some students are at UPMC East, but the kids, it seems like the first, maybe the most injured went to Franklin. Not Franklin, to Forbes Regional, because he did say, I heard him with my own ears in response to a reporter's question, that these are, yes, potentially life-threatening injuries. Anytime you get stabbed in the chest or stabbed in the back, stabbed in the stomach, and those are all places that he suggested some of these students' wounds were, that would, I would imagine, be a life-threatening wound. And I believe this is the guy who knows that one of the victims was kept alive by another student applying pressure to the wound. Well, I appreciate the updates from you all and the points of view that you bring. Margaret's writing, they have no detectors at the school. Well, again, and I mean, here again, and this is, these things that upend, these events that upend our sense of security. And I think, I was thinking, because our heads go in a million directions, I was thinking that so many people have run from the city to the suburbs because they do not feel safe in the city, so they want to go to the suburbs and give their children that, that's the security of a suburban environment. And I think this kind of thing just really unsettles a lot of people's sense of their security. If they heard that there was some trouble at a Pittsburgh high school, they'd think, yeah, well, it's the city. Right? But if this happens at Franklin Regional, it's about as far from the city as you can get. And it does remind us that these cartoon images we have of people and neighborhoods and environs and our own selves as we make our way through our lives can be so incorrect. But as I said, I guess necessary for us to be able to get out of bed in the morning. If we were keenly aware that all the time, that anything can happen at any moment, and that when you let your children out the door to go to school, they may in fact not be safe. I mean, that would paralyze. And Jess, in fact, when she heard this, the first thing she said is, who would want to be a parent? You have to be willing to live with, and we were talking about this last week, not only ambiguity, but chaos. The constant threat of chaos. All right, so before I get into this other thing, why don't I get a break out of the way? I'll try to do this subject change, but I will be happy to be interrupted by any information or thoughts you have on what will be the big story in Pittsburgh, not only today, but this week. In a minute.
Stick around for more with Lynn Cullen Live after this.
Download the brand new CP Haps app and find out what's going on in Pittsburgh. It's the fun and free app that puts the most popular events at your fingertips. Text events to 77948 to download now and register to win tickets to Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati on April 23rd at PNC Park. The CP Haps app, brought to you by Pittsburgh City Paper.
Confusion over someone or have sudden...
Have you ever had sudden confusion, trouble speaking, or understanding someone?
It could be one of the 5 signs of stroke.
Sudden weakness or numbness of the face, arm, or leg.
Sudden trouble with vision in one or both eyes.
Suddenly having trouble walking or difficulty with balance.
Or a sudden intense headache that comes out of nowhere.
Don't wait. Call 911 immediately.
Time lost is brain lost.
Find out more at powertoendstroke.org. Brought to you by the American Heart Association, American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn@pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
All righty, the governor has released a statement about the events, saying he was shocked and saddened, as we all are. Some people on Twitter are cautioning others on Twitter to not be purveyors of rumor, and I appreciate that very much. News folks can get into trouble in this kind of a situation, obviously, with wanting to get a step ahead of the competition. And it's so unnecessary because ultimately we all get the same pieces of information. Nobody's going to say, I heard it 20 seconds earlier on this station as opposed to that. Right now, there are 8 of the victims at Forbes Regional in Monroeville, 5 at UPMC Upstart East, 4 at Children's Hospital, 1 at Presby, 1 at Mercy, and 1 at Allegheny General. And my sense is that, of course, the most injured are probably at the closest facilities, Forbes and UPMC East. That would be my guess. And the others are moved to other hospitals simply to prevent one trauma center from being overwhelmed. I mean, if we are lucky here in that it doesn't all end up in one ER's lap. There are all these. They say that this rampage lasted as long as a half hour. And here again, I can't get my head around that. Boy, I'll tell you what people are going to be saying. If the teacher or authorities or security there had a gun, they could have taken this kid out in 30 minutes. Almost makes me want to argue the point. Okay, that's all I have at the moment. And we have Beth writing in that my nephew goes to Franklin. I have a lot of friends whose kids went there. They've graduated from there since, and I do have one friend whose daughter's in the middle school. My nephew goes to Franklin, and thank God he was running late today. He would have been near one of the classrooms where this tragedy took place. All the kids are now texting back and forth about what has happened. These are the texts that I would be very careful about, right? His one friend was stabbed in the neck, but was smart enough to pull the fire alarm to get kids out of the school. I know the word hero is overused, but I would say it applies to him and the high school principal who I guess tackled the assailant. Well, all this is more than I know at this point, but that's, anyone who finally put a stop to him. If someone tackled him, the principal, fine, great, yes. And someone pulling the fire alarm, very, very smart. And Beth says, and something tells me my nephew's mom will never yell at him again for being late. Might have saved his life. Ansel saying CNN interviewed a doctor from Forbes, and he said the knife wound's entry points were larger than 2 inches. Wow. And so that obviously suggests that this was a big, big knife. Makes me wonder if this was a kid who watched too many, ninja movies. Who knows? Who knows? It's a way, kids, this is the age where you're so often, I was bewildered and lost and often depressed and feeling like you have two left feet and you don't fit. I was not an unpopular kid and I felt that way. So what would maybe an unpopular kid with trouble at home and trouble in his head and trouble in school and few friends, or if bullying, which I am starting to see little remarks about, plays a part and all this stuff. And you also know, because you're living in this world with the rest of us, that this is one way you can, you can exact a measure of revenge, because a lot of others have done it too. And you not only do you get the revenge, but you get your story told. And I don't know that they think much beyond that. He might have been thinking, I won't survive this attack because so many of those who do this don't, and that this is sort of suicide by, he was maybe hoping not to survive it. Who the hell knows? And we will all now know this kid's name. We will learn his story. And what we were saying the other day about these stories, invariably, the mother who drowned her two little boys over in Wexford, another lovely suburban couple. The horror stories in the last few weeks have all been coming out of suburbia. They have not been coming out of the city, for whatever that means. But somehow that doesn't get in our heads. People are people, and they're everywhere. I forgot what my point was. Oh, my point was that invariably it all comes back to mental illness. Almost always mental illness. Mental illness that we as a society simply cannot comprehend, obviously, because we treat it like it's a stepchild in the world of medicine. Insurance companies treat it like that. It's considered shameful if you acknowledge that you might have a mental issue. It's as though the only thing we're willing to accept is that we are corporeal beings, so injuries to our bodies are, I guess, okay. Although increasingly, if you get certain diseases, you can be pilloried for lifestyle that maybe brought you to this pretty pass. But people who suffer mental illness generally hide it, try to hide it. Their families hide it or try to hide it. And efforts to help these families and their children are usually pretty ineffective, I think. Chuck is saying MSNBC is now reporting that the stabber is a sophomore, and we should expect an update from the hospital soon. He was treated for 30 minutes on the scene by paramedics and is now being transported to a hospital. So he must have had some injuries, maybe by virtue of being tackled or people trying desperately to keep him at bay. All right. I'm going to go back to this this little piece I want to bring to your attention, but again, I just will be happily interrupted. This kind of thing, it takes the wind out of me. It's sure it does you too. There were two separate pieces in newspapers over the last few days that I saw. And what was funny is that one ran a piece about how we're always bemoaning that language is disappearing. I mean, like, our vocabularies are shrinking, and people don't know what words mean, and words are misused, and malaprops are the order of the day, and gone is Western civilization. I often engage in those kinds of diatribes myself. But then there was this other piece about, the changes to language shows an invigorated language, and it's only fuddy-duds who get freaked out about it. Let's start with that one, because, both of these are written by people who love language. The one who tells us all to calm down is written by John McWhorter. And he has something in here that I don't even comprehend. Maybe Jess will, because Jess is younger. He says that the phrase "because X."
What?
You've never heard that. Because X. Guess what it says here? That expression was recently celebrated by the American Dialect Society as the word of 2013.
What?
Right. How could something be the word of 2013 and none of us even know what the hell it means? Or I have never even heard it. I mean, it sounds like it's taken from what do you call that? Mathematical equation kind of thing. Because X. And then he doesn't. Because X, they say here, is another way to say we're all in this together.
Nobody says that. Nobody.
Well, nobody you know, apparently, but John McWhorter over here, he knows people, and so does the American Dialect Society, because X means we're all in this together. How would you even use that in a sentence? Okay, so that'd be nice to get an answer to if anybody knows it. Because X. I have to admit, I have never encountered something like this that is celebrated as being like the word of the decade or the word of the day or the word, and where I have never, ever, ever, ever heard of it. And the fact that a 20-something sitting right here has never heard of it either strikes me as really odd. What the hell does it mean, because X? Well, we know he says it means we're all in this together. Where does that come from? But he also says this, that no anthropologist who comes along in, 100 years and would be observing our society would not recognize, I'm going to say some words I'm not supposed to say, fuck, shit, all those words you're not supposed to say. This guy says any anthropologist looking at our entertainment or being able to eavesdrop on what would pass for a conversation or would ever suggest that those words were profanity. Because what qualifies a word as profane, you cannot have a word that is so commonly used in just constant usage and say that it's a profane word. It clearly is not. In fact, it's something that seems to be almost a word that people cannot communicate without. So words like that, fuck, shit, he says, we might still be under the impression that these are bad words, but looking, any scientist or dialectician looking back at us would say those weren't bad words, those were important words. And if you look at the words, he's saying, and I've heard this argument before, the words now that we consider, that we culturally consider really something we don't want to hear, are words that are aimed at a group. So it's not it's not verbs. Fuck. Shit. It's not stuff like that. It doesn't have to do with bodily function. We're beyond that silliness. Doesn't do it to us anymore. The words now that we are appalled by are like words you cannot say. The N word. I can think of a million racial, religious, all those. Those are the words you cannot say. Those are the words that our culture actually will punish you for saying. Now, maybe the Federal Communications Commission will still punish for fuck and shit, but they are operating in some other reality, really. And this guy makes the point that shows progress being made. That if the words that you cannot say are words that hurt people, as opposed to words that make people, I don't know, say, oh my God, if they're harmful words, that shows that we've actually become more polite. Even as we say fuck all the time, the fact that you cannot say the N word or call me a whatever, a number of words for being a Jew, or, I mean, you can, but you better watch where you do it. Because those are the verboten words now. And he says, so we may not anymore speak with like the beautiful English that you might hear if you're watching Downton Abbey. But he suggests in many ways the English we are employing is more civilized. Now, don't ask me. And I think his point is there's a lot, even when people say like all the time, like this, like that, he says that's almost a very polite thing to do too, because it functions to acknowledge an objection while underlining one's own point. So to say this is like the only way to make it work is pushing your point, but pulling back enough with the like that you're not being pushy. And he sees a lot of the little things going on in our language now as like that, as concerned with the impact our words are having on the person on the receiving end of those words. So we fudge things. Maybe that uptick speech is part of that too. I don't want to come on too strong, so I'm just, And here's where he says, the language is becoming gentler, more polite, more concerned with the other. At the same time, it has released out into our generalized vocabulary words that used to be considered the worst things you could say. Fuck. Right? And this has changed from what used to be the words you simply could not say, which were words about that were considered sacrilegious, right? So to say, Jesus, right, or God. And one of the things that shocked me when I first got into talk, and this would be like 30 some years ago, and I say God a lot. Jeez, God. Bleh. I was amazed at the number of calls I would get. And this is before people could text you or email you. I would get calls or letters saying, will you please stop taking the Lord's name in vain? And for centuries, those were the words you couldn't say. And that's pretty much gone by the boards. And now the bodily function words that were then the words you could never, ever, ever say, those have, whether you like it or not, gone too and are in full usage. But he says the fact that we now concern ourselves with words that try to isolate people or push people or are seen as aggressive, that we now are very conscious of those words, that this bespeaks progress. It's an interesting point of view. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I put it out there for your perusal. And I'm going to get another break in here, and anybody have any info for me, send it to me, and I'll get to the other point of view about our language after we give you these words from our sponsors.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
BergBargains.com is your best bet for great deals in the Berg. Log on today for exclusive bargains from your favorite events and shows like Pyrofest, City Theater, The Improv, plus discounts on gift cards to P.F. Chang's and Winghart's. BergBargains.com, Pittsburgh's best bargains. BergBargains.com.
Welcome to Move Time Radio, presented by the Arthritis Foundation, and we're smack dab in the middle of our dance-a-thon to fight arthritis pain. Me, I've been grooving for 10 hours straight, baby, but I'm a boogie machine. See, movement is just one of the ways to help fight osteoarthritis pain. Another is weight loss. You get rid of just 1 pound. That's 4 pounds of pressure off each knee. For more information on managing pain, visit fightarthritispain.org. Then meet me on the dance floor. This message brought to you by the Arthritis Foundation and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Well, it's interesting to see on Twitter how people are policing the tweeters, too. Mm-hmm. Here's somebody who got on the talker over at KD right now because he's tweeting stuff, and then he's putting hashtag Get Marty or something. And Virginia Montanez writes, not the time for self-promoting hashtags. And then she might have gotten some blowback from that, so she says, sorry I'm being so bitchy. I'm just super appalled right now. And she had put out a tweet begging media to concern themselves with being right as opposed to being first. And I appreciate the job she's doing. Being told the student who was in fact tackled by an administrator is in custody, and there was a teen seen in the back of a police car leaving the school about a half hour ago. And I guess that is it. Yeah, male sophomore. It's pretty much the same thing. Everybody's okay. So the other thing on the language, if you'll allow me, while we wait for more information. Oh, that is so cool. Didn't I say, let's get Andrew Jackson off the $20 bill the other day? Mm-hmm. And here's somebody tweeting, let's get bloody Andrew Jackson off the $20 bill. Our currency and genocide should not mix. That's interesting. So that really is... Okay, I'm being told here, and this is, I guess, new information, that, and this is the only other adult that we've heard of one adult at Forbes, and it says here that a male security guard was stabbed in the stomach. So maybe that is that would be the adult at Forbes, and it shows, I guess, an effort to secure the students. Meant that he put himself truly in harm's way. So they're saying it's 19 students and one security guard that are the physically injured. You have to realize that there are others that are emotionally injured by this event, obviously. Oh, Ray's writing about because X. I have a small sense of what this means. They aren't saying you use the phrase because X. The X is representing any word that isn't of or a full clause. What? Did you get that?
Wait. Repeat what he just...
Okay, I shall repeat. I have a small sense of what this means. They are not saying you use the phrase because X.
Yes, I get
The
it.
X is representing any
right.
word that isn't
You're right.
of
Yes, you're right. Yes,
or a full
I thought
clause.
That. I do.
So like what?
Okay, like... I'm so tired this morning because work. Or...
Oh.
Not... something like that.
So you don't do word... Okay, so this is now... It's another... Oh, so the phrase isn't because X. The phrase is because...
And then, yes, I get
any
it.
word that you insert.
Yes.
So, do you speak that way too?
I do. And
Oh, so you do.
You can also... It's so ridiculous. But saying, like, I can't is also another thing. So, I can't with life because work.
So you guys are dropping words
pretty
and... Okay, so now you do. You agree because...
I can't with the south side because sluts.
Wait, what did you say? I can't,
with
with the south side because sluts.
Yeah.
That's a sentence?
Yeah. It's not, I know it's not right, but...
Oh, my heart goes out. My heart goes out to the English teachers out there.
At least I know how to...
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Chuck. Thank you. So he's saying, Chuck says, so if somebody asks you a question, why do you believe in evolution? And you would answer, because science.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Or why did you put a white rag in your car window? Because maybe somebody would see it and help me change the flat tire because, hey, needed help.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So ridiculous.
And Ray writes, much ado about nothing because, hey, who cares? Okay. Jeez. It's hard to keep up, isn't it? I'm glad we have each other. Chuck writes, latest press conference notes. Happened on the first floor. Perp, 16-year-old sophomore. No motive known. School staff included in the victim count. That would be the security guard. Male security guard with stomach wound, but had the sophomore in custody. School principal helped secure the sophomore. Sophomore has injuries to his hands. All injured are students except the security guard. Okay. Yeah, so we're pretty up to date. In regard to bad words you're not supposed to say, Bill writes this, the F and S words, no, I'm not even going to write them. Okay. Were once vulgar in the sense of being coarse, but now they're also vulgar in the older sense of vulgar, in the sense they are common. Yes, exactly. Exactly. They're still vulgar, but now they're vulgar as in Common. I'm not sure being common makes all things good, though. Right, fine. But they clearly are used. So to say that they're words you cannot use is absurd. I'm struck by the whole idea that vulgarity is somehow unchristian. Yeah, they don't have anything to do with each other, do they? You want to see vulgarity? Check out, Geoffrey Chaucer. He was very Christian. He's so vulgar you can't believe your eyes. Profanity is literally about unholy speech. So the profane and profanity and vulgarity, right, different. Yet the third commandment specifically warns against taking the Lord's name in vain. So it is, yes, it is breaking a commandment. It says 0 against vulgarity, the Bible. Gone by the boards or not, the third commandment is still going strong. So just watch all the goddamn it, Lynn. But the rest I don't care about. And I speak the third commandment regularly, and I break the third commandment regularly myself. I blame this computer. Okay, I don't know if I'm ever going to, I'm sorry. I find myself, I was with a friend who's very Christian, very, her religion is very important to her the other day, and when I'm with her, I'm very aware of that, but it doesn't necessarily stay ahead of my mouth. So I often find myself when I'm with her saying things like, Jesus Christ, oh I'm sorry, and blah, 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 Jesus, and I'm sorry, kid, I'm sorry, and she, she still loves me, but I'm sure it grates. I try very hard not. Okay, PJ saying because sounds a bit like an old Jewish person. Because, yeah. Right. New version similar to what do I know from? So, what do I know from that? Yeah, a little bit like that. Same kind of a shrugging, a verbal shrug. Okay, so this other word thing I've got here is by Frank Bruni, the New York Times opinion writer. And he's having one of those experiences almost on a daily basis of realizing he's totally not in touch with a few generations removed. Because he's now teaching, and he's teaching at Princeton. So you got to figure these are, you get into Princeton, you're a smart kid, and he's blown away by how much these smart Princeton kids don't recognize what he's talking about. So if he said that last week in a class he mentioned the movie They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And he saw all these blank faces looking at him. Are you blank on that too? Okay. And he said only one of the students in the class had heard of the movie. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? This is for Jess. Jane Fonda was in the movie. It's a movie set in the Depression where people did these dance marathons to make enough money so they could maybe eat, where they danced on their feet for hours and hours and hours. And one of the lines that I think Fonda says, as they're barely standing and they're desperate, is she says, they shoot horses, don't they? Saying, put me out of my misery. We don't put our, whatever. It's a good movie. She stars opposite Susan Sarandon's brother. It's a good movie. Okay, and then he found out that they didn't know who Jane Fonda was. Now, you know who Jane Fonda is. Mm-hmm. Ted Turner. Mm-hmm. A relationship with him. See, Jess is more up on things. And these guys are Barbarella.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, see now. Well, and okay, you think you would have gotten into Princeton? No. But how come you're more on top of things than these Princeton kids? Because he said they didn't know any of this stuff. Isn't that interesting? He brought up Vanessa Redgrave.
I love her.
Yeah, he said he got blank stares from the Princeton kids. Greta Garbo. Mm-hmm. Blank stares from the Princeton kids. He talked about Proust's Madeleine.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he lost
I
you
know
too.
who he is, but I don't
Proust.
know that.
Okay. No one knew what the Madeleine signified, or for that matter, who Proust was. And yet he says these are young men and women who are smart enough to get into Princeton. Well, he's blown away by this. And that gets him thinking about the fact that in this technological world, in this wired world that now has hundreds of television stations and countless ways to get information in cyberspace, and how we can each now customize our diet of entertainment/information, which we all do, right? That he says it's quite clear that common points of reference are dwindling. So as more and more of us, choices used to be limited. So we all did watch the Ed Sullivan Show. And America could, we were on one page, not because we necessarily wanted to be, but because that is all there was at the, on the banquet table. And now the banquet table is the banquet hall, and then there's another banquet hall next door and another one after that and after that. So we're not all taking in the same information. There's no agreement at all on some kind of communal information. So he says, as what used to be water cooler talk, it's pretty much gone. Even when there was like a great TV show and you figured everybody was watching it, that's not even true anymore. What?
For the most part.
For the most part, it is. But also that becomes generational.
Yeah.
He points out, for instance, in the 70s, All in the Family was the top-rated television show. And more than 50 million people would tune in a country of 215 million. 50 million of those people, that's a huge percentage, were watching that same program at the same time. The number one series last year on television was NCIS. A typical episode of the number one series on television now attracts 22 million. Archie Bunker got 50 million 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and the top show now only gets 22 million, and the country is almost 100 million more people, or is 100 million more. So the share of the thing that is considered where everybody's going is smaller and smaller and smaller. And he calls this, and the word balkanization is used to talk about breaking into smaller pieces. It had to do with, with geopolitics, the balkanization of countries. But he says this is a balkanization of experience. And I've talked about this too, because it has an impact. It makes it harder to find commonality. It makes it harder for people to understand what community really is, or that there's something bigger and larger outside of their own purview and interests that is something that they sign on to, pledge to. Like when we pledge allegiance to the United States of America. Supposedly that should be this unifying thing for Americans, and as we know, it is not. So he quotes a colleague of his at Princeton, a professor of history, who calls this the age of fracture, breaking apart. Everybody with their own universe, everybody creating their own environment. And he says it has a lot of upsides. No single cultural dogma can hold sway anymore. A person can find their own individual lens and their own individual voice and language for their worlds to come alive. So in terms of the actualization of the individual, this is a great time. But it also means that we're all speaking different languages in a way, and we're living in different worlds, and finding a collective vocabulary is going to become increasingly harder. And I think both of these pieces on language are thought-provoking, and I would say that they are both pretty much correct. Bill writes, Lynn, we have Pittsburghers. Yeah, I agree. I had this sense too. He says, we Pittsburghers have been doing the because X business forever. Yeah, the house needs washed. That's sort of the same kind of thing, isn't it? It's just deciding that you're not going to, you just skip. It's a kind of shorthand where you just don't bother with these words that are understood. It drives me crazy too, because I do like the language I learned. Wow, Forbes Regional is saying there have been as many as 20 surgeons in the ER at Forbes at one time. They've called in all those surgeons. 2 are still in critical condition at Forbes, although one of those has stabilized, so that's really good. A liver surgeon specialist has been called to the scene. Okay. Well, that's the story. I'm sorry. And you know what? It'll be the story tomorrow. So, okie doke. That's it for me. Enjoy this sunny day if you can, and you should, because we'll go back to that great Gandhi quote. Live as if, what's the real quote? Live as if it were your last day, and learn as if you'll live forever. That's a good one to keep in mind. Thank you all. Be safe. Okay.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.